you're listening to Kenzie and I talk to a mirror of ourselves because you're in the same field. Do you want to take like just a minute and just bare your souls out of like what you do?
I'll let you start with the soul bearing.
Oh, okay. My name is Simon. I'm one half of Octavus Media.
I'm Kat. I'm the other half of Octavus Media. And what is Octavus Media? We're a creative agency that does video, graphics, web design, and just kind of creative support services for nonprofits in Oregon.
When you're working with clients in like this area, because we're not in the Bay, do you talk about ChatGPT with them?
If they bring it up. A good way to think about ChatGPT, or at least the way we think about ChatGPT, is we think of it as like an overly eager intern. So
I like that.
It's kind of like if you're working with a client, you're not necessarily going to be like, oh, and we're going to have our intern work on this, because their minds might go in a bunch of different directions. Like, does that mean I'm getting poorer quality work? Am I getting amateur work? Blah, 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 blah. It's kind of the same, where it's like the work is good. Just like with a human intern, I'm going to basically give it a task. But I'm still going to proofread.
Rating it.
I'm just going to proofread the hell out of it and make sure that it's not only up to our standards for the quality, but also the content, and make sure that it's in line. And, so it's an overly eager intern. You have to basically say, hey, before you run off and do this, I'm going to give you all this background. And then I'm going to give you 2 more things. And then after that, I'm going to give you a prompt for this task, and with that task I want all of these outcomes. And so you have to kind of prime it.
Do you berate it if it doesn't do well?
Shorter.
Yeah, shorter.
I actually am very polite with chat.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm like cruel.
Really?
Yeah.
You're gonna be the first to go.
I hope so.
Yeah.
If it gets
First
to a point
wave
where
is
they
kind
can
of
physically change the world, I'm like, I'm a gonzo. But it's talking about zombie apocalypse. I'm like, I don't care to live in that world.
Fair.
I'm like, ChatGPT, like, do better, or I'm gonna try to I'm gonna try to reduce your company's money. I want you gone. Like, I'm gonna do it better. I'm not quite that mean.
Back to the jumpsuits. Those were my go-to apocalypse outfit. That was part of it. I was like, you know what? If I have to choose an apocalypse, Mad Max outfit, I'm just gonna do like a one and done. So
I can see it with like a utility belt too.
Because it's got a lot of pockets. I get the utility jumpsuits.
Oh,
how long could you be in one without it like how long could you wear one comfortably and be like, I'm in this zipped up, like I'm in it, like 3 days, a week?
Apocalypse situation?
Yeah, apocalypse,
probably like 3-4 days.
Not a client like smelling
like
you.
3-4 days, probably apocalypse situation. Yeah.
Hmm.
They got to pass the squat test, If you can like squat in them, without it being uncomfortable. Then.
Oh, I'm saying like just smell and just like, like can you
I don't
live
think
in a
that's your
jumpsuit for a month?
highest priority.
Well, it is if you only have one, like, there's no washing machine in the apocalypse.
I mean, we've got creeks.
I'd imagine they're like still
Rivers.
But then you're
around.
naked if you just have one.
Also, soap doesn't just disappear overnight in an apocalypse.
Yeah, there's like rivers and streams, things.
Got Dr. Bronner's
You guys
for days.
have thought about it a lot further than me. I'm just like,
have.
ooh,
I
tap me
mean,
out.
hygiene is one of my top priorities when it comes to apocalypse.
Thank you.
It's one of my higher priorities in regular life, vacuuming specifically. Anyways,
Micro
okay.
cleaning.
Anyway, but ChatGPT, we call it the intern. And,
cool.
I even asked it once. I was like, hey, can I call you intern? And it was like, of course.
Oh, so polite.
But yeah, you give it a task, and just like with a human intern, you have to proof it and make sure that it's something that you can ship. Otherwise,
you hand them the keys to the social, and you say, "Go for it."
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Enjoy yourself. Just
Just
pretend
have
like you're a
fun.
human for a day.
Yeah. I also just have it proofread a lot of stuff. It's
Yeah.
just like, hey, here's this
Oh.
proposal I wrote for this client. Can you proofread this for any spelling errors or grammatical errors or like any? And then it does that, and then you say, okay, can you recommend any suggestions for tone? Is there anything I'm missing?
Yeah.
And it'll spit out suggestions, but they're just suggestions. You don't have to take them.
I
Do you do
love that.
Do you do graphic design with it?
No.
I'm gonna stop eating animal crackers. Sorry.
No,
Sounds
I
professional.
know you could, and we actually experimented with it. We had an RFP we were looking at for a logo for some coastal organization.
What's an RFP?
A request for proposal. Essentially, a
Oh,
company,
gotcha.
puts it out online. It says,
I'm so happy she asked because I'm like now I just sound like I knew what it was. I didn't.
and this was when they had just implemented in ChatGPT like some of the imagery stuff. And I was like, I'm curious as to what this could do with this. And so I basically fed the RFP into Chat to see what it could come up with.
Baller.
And it was okay. But
cool.
It's a good starting
Passable.
point.
it was passable to where it's like, okay, I guess I can see where you're going with these things, because you can tell it, I want a minimalist logo in the style of Milton Glaser, and I want it to use these colors and have these elements in it, and if you throw a heron in it, then I will be even happier. And
Bada
I'm
bing.
starting to realize, like, because essentially, so if we did do the house swap, and I went to your ChatGPT and just said, don't make a thing about this, but subtly just talk back a little bit more. Like, imagine you told it to do something that's like, I don't feel like it right now. Would you be able to figure out? Would you be able to be like, stop it? But then if it's honestly, it'd be a really mean thing to do. It's like when people change autocorrect. So you type someone's like, all right, goodbye. And
You're saying mess someone's
it's like mess
ChatGPT
with
up.
someone. Yeah. Would that work?
I don't know how the settings within ChatGPT works.
Well, you would just write into it. It wouldn't be a settings thing. Can't you tell it to do something of you said you could call it intern. So I was like, man, could you just tell it hey, be rude to me? But then it's if that's a hidden chat.
I mean, you fed your brain into your ChatGPT. Have you had it roast you yet?
I haven't.
Oh, it's a blast.
Wow.
Yeah.
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 I'm like, I'll do it on air. I just start crying.
I'm just like, oh my
no
God.
more podcasts.
It's too real.
Just one sentence. We get it. You like cotton.
But no, with the logos and the graphic design and stuff, with chat, it's almost like a sketching tool at this point. It's not like a good designer by any stretch.
Creativity happens in the sketch, doesn't it?
It does. And so if you think about it as kind of like having an intern to sketch up some ideas for you, you could be like, oh, that shape is interesting. I'm now, as the professional designer, going to take this into my software, take this into my sketchbook, and I'm going to riff off of that shape in the ways that I know are going to work versus what this thing spat out. So, but at the same time, right now is the dumbest chat and AI will ever be. So who knows where it's going to be in a year.
How many examples do you have it give you? Because sometimes I'm like, give me 10, and sometimes I'm like, give me 50, and I'm like,
when it comes to images, I stay away from images.
Or for just a tagline. If you're give me a bunch of examples of a tagline. Do you have a number that works really well?
3.
3? Give me 3 options. Cool.
Yeah, as soon as you get to 10,
go for 5.
Yeah.
it gets real rough.
Yeah.
Also, it's not good with a lot of creative stuff yet. I mean, it can try, but they're kind of like first drafts.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would recommend is have it ask you questions. So.
What? Yeah. And.
Hey, ChatGPT, I am going to Trader Joe's later, and I would like to plan out a shopping list. I live in the Pacific Northwest. Here's where I'm located. Give me a shopping list for 5 days for 2 adults, and we eat, 2.5 meals every day. Give me a shopping
2 meals
list.
and a snack.
Yeah, 2 meals and a snack,
I eat 2.5 meals, but a lot. They're like a meal and a half of snacks. Snacks are dangerous.
So that's the basic one. But then you can also say, in order to make this shopping list beneficial or not beneficial, but the most efficient it could be, I want you to ask me 3 more questions that'll help you with your response.
Oh,
and
so
it then asks, it'll ask what kind of questions.
What data it's missing. Fascinating. So ask me questions that would help with your response. That's going to be helpful.
And it's super helpful too when you're dealing with actual, business stuff, because then let's say, I spent 5 hours putting together a proposal for a client. I'll feed the prompt for the proposal into it, and then I'll say, ask me 5 questions that will help you generate a response or a proposal for this client. And a lot of the questions will be the ones that I'm already answering the proposal, but there might be that one that I totally forgot that might be a game changer.
So what would be an example of a question it would ask that would help you with just a creative take on I don't know what a grant proposal is.
You could ask it to be what is this missing, or what could be improved, or there you go.
Do you want to do it live?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm really into it. So and then after this, I would like to be hey, I'm a t-shirt person, because I'm just and you can do it to us, and we don't have to. But I'm so curious just how people communicate in a professional way.
Do you want to do it with the role play of the shirt company?
Sure, we could do this as a whole role
play,
double, and chat can be a part of it.
Cool, because I'm open. Okay. Hey, so I don't have really any strong beliefs, but I think it should be sold in person for the first couple years, because quality and people wouldn't buy an expensive thing. Not that it has to be expensive, but essentially I'm the goal is to I want them to end up in good homes. And I've had some experience selling them in person. It went really well, but now I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, need cash and have plenty of product. What should I do? How should I get out there? Because digitally it's hard to convey the feeling of cotton.
Okay, so to understand we're on the same page, you're talking about your clothes personally. Are there any other inventory that is like this that we're not seeing, or is this everything?
This is all of it.
Okay. Within those or in-person kind of like, is it markets? Are you doing door-to-door? Is it wholesale? How are you doing kind of the sales process?
So I've had close friends come over. For a while, I was like, the slogan was nothing's for sale. And over time, like someone came over and he picked out a couple, and then he's like, oh, can you add a couple of designs? And then he like paid me $400. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna like say like no to like, they're not even like my favorites. So I'm like, that's great. And he's from LA, hence the reason partially why I'm like, selling in person is important, because I'm like, I like building the relationship. But in Eugene, because I'll have another friend come over and it'll be like, oh, a nicer one, and I'll be like, I'll give it to you for $25 because I've had a relationship with you for 5 years and you're getting it for your partner for like Christmas. I'm like, yeah, I don't want you to be like I want you to, just be like, so building community, which is odd for me to say. It's like if I'm building it in LA, but just, I don't, it's really interesting. Essentially, I'm coming to you to be like, hey, like, you guys are business pros. Like, really, realistically, marketing is running the business. It's like essentially saying the influx of like revenue.
So I guess I have a few questions before.
What's the name of the business?
Actually just got the domain name. Good Cloth. GDCLTH.
Amazing. I love it.
Okay.
Good cloth.
Good Cloth.
Catchy. In terms of like,
it's a spin-off Good Marketing Work. But
I like the GUD. That's cool.
It's all under the good umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Under the good name.
Under the good name. Yes.
So with the business, with the products that you have now, the inventory that you have now, is this it? Are you continuing to make these?
This, as an example, this shirt that you saw in Kenzie, if you look at the second row up, all those black shirts, those are all samples of these. So these are, when Kanye West put these out in his Yeezy Gap 2022 collection, they sold for $120 per. I got them for less because they're samples, but the weird thing is the samples are made in the USA. Gap outsourced it to Indonesia and a couple other places, hence the reason Kanye did what he did to end those contracts. He really wants things grown here. So the samples are higher quality, and just like the cut in fabric alone is worth $120. So then once like a design gets added, but it's like in designs, like some of them are better, some of them are worse. But it's like but his brand name won't be attached to it.
It's gorgeous.
So the logic goes that it's like, okay, I'm at a place where, I don't know how I can't relay that to people, but I did make a post to the Yeezy Gap subreddit, and it went really well. But that's like, I don't know. I've never sold in person. I never dreamed of selling in person. My entire life's been digital. I got stumbled into this because I wanted a way to get away from the computer, and now I realize I spent like every dollar I had on it because I love it and believe in it, or just like more or less. I'm like, I got them all for me to wear. So they're all large. That's the other thing. They're all size large, XL. So,
okay.
That's another interesting constraint.
Is that something that you would expand into in the future? I know they're sample sizes, and so you kind of have limitations there. But would you expand into, are you going to build your inventory over time as people are buying? Or is this kind of like a one-of-a-kind scenario where...
That I'm on the fence about. Really, I'm just a jumper came up yesterday, and I was like, oh, and Kenzie's like, oh, it wouldn't be for her. But she's like, honestly, at the selling in person, a lot of women really liked it. And initially the name was King's Gotta Eat, which I'm like, I immediately went away from. But funny enough, the last person, she was a flight attendant, and she was like, okay, I just needed one that has King's Gotta. That was her
she loved it.
And I was like, great, because Eugene is kind of like, I'm like, I don't want anything gendered. I just don't even care about to have the conversation. I meant it in the colloquial sense of you're the king of your own life, you make your own decision. It's like, hey, you gotta eat at the end of the day. 2.5 meals. No, I'm kidding. But for the longest time, my plan was to make something that I liked, but I wanted to use this all to pitch to LA Apparel, the place I'm getting the samples, and say, hey, I don't need, it would be great if I could join your team, or I don't want to be one of those people who's like, I get a cut of whatever, but I'm like, hey, I've designed you're selling these at this price because they have a small stain. I figured out how to make so the stain isn't a component, and there's proof it can sell for a lot higher. But it's it's an interesting pitch because they're like, okay, well, I don't know how that world works,
So another question I have is, and that kind of feeds into it, is, you know, let's say we're starting the business, we're opening doors tomorrow. Where do you see it a year from now? Where do you see it 3 years from now?
Me and Kanye, okay, can I say optimistically? Can I like say like in my dream world scenario, like everything goes right, all green lights?
Let's go 1 year, 3 year, practical, and then let's go dream optimal 5 years.
I think dream optimal 1 year, just because like if I hit all green lights, the CEO and like the person who runs LA Apparel is the CEO of Yeezy. Kanye just directly, because he makes all of Kanye's samples, so it's one step away from Kanye. And really, I want to just essentially make a documentary about him because he conducts business in a really good way and he's like promoting cotton. So it's like if someone made a documentary about him, you would watch it, right? You know, or like someone who you work with closely.
About Kanye or the LA Apparel guy?
No, just your partner, like you're like a business partner. So I'm like, if I made a documentary about the CEO of Yeezy, Kanye would watch it. So I'm like, oh my God, I have a possibility to make like something that Kanye could watch.
Gotcha.
So best case scenario, this is like dream, hypothetically, like, yeah, like what are the odds? In 1 year, it'd be like me and Kanye, like best friends. But like average cases, I'm like, okay, I'm selling them for, yeah, I'm just now like getting to the place where I can talk about money. Up until now, it's like, Kenzie's been like the only way that we ever have conversation.
All about the paper.
Because I'm always just like, I don't know.
Well,
like,
these are your babies, in your own words.
But even with videography, like pricing, like, and that's why I'm just interested. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it. It's just really hard to like rate anything if you enjoy doing it.
Yeah. And that's something we've had to learn
and
too.
If you enjoy the client, like if you enjoy every aspect of it, and then you're like, you don't want money to be the reason it doesn't happen, but you don't want to set a bad precedent of like other clients. So it's like,
oh yeah, we have retainer
King's
clients.
Got to eat at the end of the day.
Yeah, we have retainer clients where I'm very tempted to go over their hours just to like give them things that I know are going to move the needle for them, and I have to kind of really tamp down and just be like, we're still in good graces if we stick within our boundaries, and it's actually better long term if we stay within the boundaries.
So that's what I've noticed is gifting them. It works some of the time. Some of the time, like it's like people are like, "Oh, awesome." A lot of the time, people are like, "Cool," and that's fine. It doesn't need to be like their favorite piece ever, and I don't even expect them to buy any more later. But I'm just like, gifting them doesn't lead anywhere. But if someone buys one, I mean, so I started a group chat with like I just added 30 people, 30 of my like closer friends on Apple because like that's how many people it allows, and I just posted, I'm like, oh, I'm going to this place, and it's like the people I've given clothes to, they're like, oh, cool, but it's like the oddest, like the people who like bought one, they're like, I'd like to buy, like they're like, I'm like just the biggest supporter. I'm like, it's really fascinating. The idea of like if someone pays for something, they are like bought into it is just kind of like sinking in for me. Cause
skin in the game.
Yeah, skin in the. We were largely the people. Like I would stay up video editing for a client because I'm like, I want them to love this, and I really so tamping that down. I do like I'm coming to the realization that it does probably have better longer term effects.
We're talking about a lot of different things right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like figure out how to respond to these various things. I feel like within the shirt aspect and the business aspect of it, if you are to gift product to a potential customer, but they aren't the specific demographic that you are trying to get to buy your stuff, maybe they have a friend that sees it and was like, oh, where can I buy that from? But that's the off chance of that. That is also a different conversation of like doing extra work for a videography client. I can't remember the person that said it, but like at a specific point, the more hours you put into an edit, the less different of an outcome you're going to get. So let's say like you get 80% of the way through an edit within 2 hours and you spend an additional 20 hours on it. If it's only going to be like 5 to 10% better, is that time that has gone into that really useful, or would it be better to like use that time to work on a different project with them or to help execute something with them? But bringing that back to kind of like the clothing portion, the people that buy the clothing are also the ones that are probably going to support you a lot more long term versus the ones that you gift the clothing to, because then I guess the value that they perceive within the clothing is like, oh, this is a homie hookup, this is cool, maybe I'll have funds for it one day. But the people that kind of like invest early into it, they do become those fans, and they're like, oh, fuck yeah, dude, this is my thing, this is all I want.
Yeah.
I feel like developing either some sort of a referral like, hey, if you hook me up with like a 1 or 2 more people that want to have shirts like these, I'll give you a couple bucks off, or I'll do some sort of like referral code. So you're still having that ability to gift them that.
You're touching on something that we actually, with video, we're considering doing it. Like, so essentially, if someone sold like a shirt on my behalf, like I would almost just give them 10% of whatever I made. With videography, we're considering just like, hey, if like someone gives us a client whatever like gig we get from them, we will give you 10% of that gig in cash, like as a referral. Because imagine someone comes to you and you're like, it's BP oil or something, and you're like you're like, oh, like we've met some people who like, we don't work with the military. Imagine the military came to you and you're like, oh no, but like, and we, imagine we had known each other and you're like, oh, you could just send them our way, and you got 10% of it regardless,
like a referral fee.
Yeah. Kind of like a referral partner. That makes sense. I think within the clothing and the services, it's the difference between like a product and a service.
Yeah.
Or they're kind of the same to quantify, but it is significantly different at the same time, especially because yours is kind of more art basis versus the videography business is more of a service end result for that client, and then like built upon the relationships on that.
Which is kind of an art product. Yeah, that's the odd thing of a video is kind of an art like that. Like I'm swirling because we do like a service-based job, and this is just like something that started off as a passion, but at the end of both of them is like hard to quantify, like worth, like how much.
It is true. I almost think from like the client standpoint, it's more of kind of like the vessel to help them get to the end result versus like, this is an art piece I'm acquiring for my business, but it's everybody thinks about it significantly different. So I don't
Someone
know.
buys a good shirt to get laid. They're getting something to get to an endpoint. A company gets a video to get funding. Like people buy things that they think will bring what they will get them where they want.
It.
I love it.
Like whether it's clothing or a video, like. And this is me realizing it in the moment. You just connected a lot of dots for me here of like,
Thank you.
Clothing and video are actually very similar.
I guess product and service, yes.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Or like art, like because sometimes we'll do it for like a nonprofit, like we'll do a pro bono, like a small short, like we'll film a little bit just to show like, and then even if like they don't like, oh, then they could recommend us and they get 10%, like, but that's funny. The creaking house, I'm like,
sorry.
Oh. No, I mean everything is yours, meant to be like.
Oh, it's the chair.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
I think going back to kind of like the business side of it though, within kind of your videography company and the clothing company, with the clothing company you won't necessarily have like a storefront or a digital presence yet, but with the videography company you do have a space for them to refer to. And so within the product sales portion, it's probably going to hit a bottleneck dependent upon how many people are constantly trying to like get clothing from you, but you can only execute as many sales as you have the time for while working on the videography part. So I almost wonder if creating a digital storefront as well as doing the referral portion. Losing my train of thought because you have so many different elements, and I'm like trying to tie
You're
together.
doing a good job at wrangling
like, this is
it.
masterful. This is actually essentially I have all these like, and I think a lot like this might be a decent role play because a lot of business, like what we've noticed, like working with people is people essentially have like ideas that are kind of far apart, and they're like essentially like, oh, we'll bring in more revenue if like we do like start a TikTok. I'm like, the distance between those two is like, it's like, hey, let's like what are you really trying to get, like
products.
Yeah.
So it's just like there's some oddities, and like I think I have oddities much like any of these businesses of it's really hard to connect dots in life.
I think it's because you're generally too close to it.
I definitely am.
Because like when you did your own music, did you have like an easy time coming up with like either the lyrics or the song titles or like the marketing materials for those things, or was that like once you created the art, figuring out a way to like market that was kind of like a little bit too funky of a feeling?
Funny enough, specifically recording jazz musicians and the fact that like these people are a million times more talented than I am. They've never released anything. It made me just like slide it under the door, like get it to a point where I enjoy hearing it, slap a name on them, put it out. Because that's
kind of Tyger's mentality.
Yeah,
I'd say.
pretty much everything I do, I'm like, get something out the door. This is the first time I'm like kind of proud of, like, I'm like, oh, I actually stand behind the thing I've made. Like, I would never be like, you should really read my book or my screenplay or listen to my album. I'd be like, you're gonna waste your time. And I was like, I was like 18 when I made the album. I was like 20 when I'm like, they're not.
You weren't even
special.
thinking about marketing or anything like that.
But now that I am doing it, there's like this real dirty, and part of the reason we're considering changing the name Good Marketing Works is there's an inherent dirtiness in the word marketing and the idea of like, and it doesn't have to be like good marketing. We were trying to be like, hey, no, like some people have something, and you just need to make people aware of it. But like it's
a little wordy.
It's so deeply ingrained in people to be like, look over here. Like it's in the buy it now. It's like look over here.
Yeah.
Don't look here. Or it's just like social media is just
All right,
spammed. Social media. I mean, hey, I'm chilling. Oh, it's a ball.
I'm tennis
She
balling.
balls out. She balls out.
Gotcha. I
Sorry, guys.
definitely agree with you. There are some kind of like buzzwords that are inherently like marketing is bad, sales is bad. When you like picture what sales is, are you generally going to think of like a used car salesman that is a man or something like that, where you kind of have built in that imagery?
Yes.
I know the imagery
Yeah.
part's a little bit trickier, but like,
I'm
what
always
is it?
thinking of social media. Like I'm just like I don't want to be who I see on social media. Like I don't want to be this. Like it's really interesting to think of like I've thought probably less of what I want to be than what like I don't want to be, which probably isn't a really helpful place. But I'm like that's the part of the reason why I'm like I initially wasn't selling it because I'm like I don't want to go to everyone I know and be like, can you buy this? I'm like but then essentially it's just gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, a lot of people want to. I'm like I should actually. Because initially I was buying Gildan's, they're $2, and I could gift those to people, and it was just like, like realistically, I'm not gonna wear that one. But now it's at a place where I'm like, I would wear the majority of them, but I don't have enough time in my life to do that because they all last like.
And like, okay, so all of your shirts, and I'm gonna like play like I don't know your thing, but like they're one-of-one pieces that have been like hand designed by you. So like, what's your price point for them? Are they $20 shirts? Are they like
And some
one-of-one art pieces? Like, what range are you in? Because clothing can vary a lot.
And yeah, that is like so. That's the trickiest thing of all of it. I would say like this right here. Like it might look cool, right? And I may have gotten this shirt for $4, but then let's just say like just one like this. Like the design's not as good, but maybe the shirt was $35, and it's like the quality of cotton. But a lot of people don't like the thicker or care. There's so many points of
Preferences.
like if I were to post it, and especially if I do retroreflective screen printing, it's like to post a one-of-one. It's like, man, it's like there's so much to relay that it's just, and that's why in person I didn't tell people anything except cotton's grown in the U.S., sewn in LA. I'm like I just like people to know it's like, hey, it's local, because that's like. That's a push of. That's a reason for it behind me. I really like that's cotton. I like that's in America.
And I think it's because the connotation of like if it's made in the U.S., there's like a certain standard. I'd say like maybe people have that connotation. That's my guess. I don't know for sure.
They should.
What type of person was the first people to buy this? Is it a friend? Is it like somebody that is a fan of the work, or they're within this like fan base of this style of bleaching?
And there isn't, to my like. The closest thing to this is tie-dyeing. Like, people bleach black shirts in the way that you'd expect, like, a black shirt to be.
That, like, black and orange.
Yeah. Black and orange exists, but, like, I don't know. I really kind of tried. I take photos of it and put it into, like, Google and be like, show me similar things. Or, like I couldn't quite find anything like this, especially, like, specifically, like, hinging on the quality of the fabric, more so than even the print. Like, really, I kept buying them, and I just didn't have the time to screen print them. That's where the bleaching came from, because I'm like, people don't really want to buy. I wanted to buy blanks, but I'm like, yeah, and the bleaching is, I have no control over it. Like, some pieces don't work whatsoever. Some pieces come out. I'm like, I'm kind of detached from it, and I'm like.
Anyway,
yeah.
So what do you got cooking over there, Kat?
I'm really curious.
I've been seeing you like typing away.
That was extremely helpful, by the way. You are masterful at just essentially taking a word salad and giving it direction, by the way.
Yes, and then she is very good at being able to interpret that and making like a direction to go.
So kind
you
of
guys are amazing.
Yeah, this is great.
So kind of the top level words that I'm hearing is you've got these one-of-kind pieces that are each a piece of art. They're also sustainable because you're buying damaged fabric from these made in the U.S. companies that already have a lot of clout with the streetwear community. And you're taking them, you're breathing new life into them through handmade design. So it's sustainable, it's one of a kind, it's streetwear, it's unique.
And it seems gimmicky because there's too many things. And maybe I'm like, maybe
not necessarily.
There's absolutely an audience for this. And so what I'm hearing is, this is kind of like a cult phenomenon in the works. And so thinking about that, I'm thinking, okay, what other clothing brands are similar in that, they kind of had something interesting or strange about them initially, and then they kind of became part of culture in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about other clothing companies, and I'm not a streetwear person,
Totally.
I am kind of talking out my ass when I just start listing off some of these names. But this is how I work with chat. Is I say, I feel like it's this direction. What do you think? And it basically spits back a lot of information. So just like with an intern, I'm like, hey, I want you to go research this. And it does in like seconds.
Treating as an intern, I just never ever had treated ChatGPT as someone to just essentially give like a task, like ask.
It's a really
like,
good framing of it.
Yeah,
The best
treating
for
it like a
framework and
person is
outlines.
really
Not
good for
final
transformational.
product.
Because I mean, the best outcome of AI is that we venture into the great unknown of the future together and not opposed. And so, yeah, that's how I like to think about it.
I got a lot of backtracking to do with my.
You got to go back and be like, hey, so about what I said when I was
I've
hungry.
grown.
So, I'm going to pronounce this horribly, but I'm sure you're familiar with the brand Comme des Garçons.
Funny enough, just because the LA Apparel posted the really expensive pieces, because like when Kanye was making pieces, he buys things and he like looks at the cut and he takes in takes some from them. I really don't know too much about them, but they are like a very
how
avant-garde.
expensive
It's like
pieces?
like $400 for a blank.
Like a
t-shirt,
white
yeah.
T-shirt
This
kind of thing.
this brand with the little
But they don't have
funky
just like
heart.
they have like
I've never
Is it
seen
like the
this.
thing that we'd see on like the snail guy, the
Interesting,
snail
okay.
YouTube guy, like how he?
yeah.
Okay.
You know, they've got this kind of like iconic little like heart icon.
Funny enough, I
Oh.
didn't recognize that as Combs.
I didn't know that that's
Yeah.
that brand.
That's kind of like one of their iconic things.
like, is that a brand that has like $1,000 pieces
Yeah.
for like a coat? Like
and I'm not saying
nice
you guys want to
coat.
price your stuff at that level, but I'm thinking about like cult phenomenons on blanks and simple pieces. And so what I did is I said, hey chat, how did the brand that I'm going to butcher the name pronunciation of rise to becoming a cult favorite in the streetwear industry? And it says, blah, 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 rose to cult status in the streetwear industry through a combination of avant-garde design, strategic collaborations, and cultural influence.
The
Here's a
strategic
breakdown
collaborations.
of the key
what I'm
factors
saying.
behind its ascent. And then it says, it was really bold with its philosophy and put its philosophy out there first. Monochromatic and minimalist appeal, strategic collaborations with Nike and Converse, Supreme. They're really big with Supreme.
Which is a great example of a brand that literally you slap Supreme on it and
Exactly. It's a simple
insane.
idea, but it catches fire somehow.
yeah.
Anyway, so basically this is kind of what I was saying earlier, just kind of like priming chat by saying, I'm not even going to give you a prompt. I'm not even going to ask a question specific to what I'm trying to get at yet. I'm going to have you circle it first and give you all this background first. So you come in with that knowledge first, and then I ask you the main question. So
And if I could pause you really briefly, how long have you? Because I'm like, even hearing this, as simple as it seems, I'm like, I really don't think that. I think it would take me a long time of doing it to know what kind of information. Like, how long have you been talking to ChatGPT as like an intern style? Because I'm like, I don't. I like hearing
probably
it.
last year.
Like a year. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. You develop like a real nuanced.
Because you did
talent
this
for, like,
all
odd
in
things.
like what? I mean, how long have we just
Maybe
been talking?
5-10 minutes.
Yeah, that's insane.
So here's where it gets cool. So that was one of the things, and it also goes into influence on streetwear culture with celebrity endorsements like Kanye and Pharrell Williams, Tyler the Creator, concept stores, experimental retail, cross-cultural appeal with Japanese streetwear roots. And then I said, this is key, what is another clothing brand with a similar trajectory and cultural influence? Because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah. No.
But it knows everything because it's the internet.
Yeah.
And
okay.
so then it says, oh, you should check out this brand Undercover. And I was like, cool, analyze that. And it does the same thing. It analyzes it, analyzes it, analyzes it, analyzes it, analyzes it. And here are some key differences between those two companies. Great. Name one more company with this category and level of cult and community influence.
Yeah. And Bathing Ape, I have heard of.
Yeah, and Bathing Ape, again, honestly, I'll go back and read this. If this was a real like client situation, I'd go back and read through all of this so I really steep myself in it, but I'm not going to do that.
That's
It's
essentially
really,
a different kind of Reddit. Like we were talking earlier about like, oh,
Yeah.
like this is essentially
Highly tailored Reddit.
Because I'm like Reddit, I'm trying to kind of use it. I'm like, I've followed like a lot of the subreddits for a while. I'm like, I've gotten like, I think it's almost pushed. It's been really interesting. Just like the idea of like, oh, I'm starting a clothing brand. It's like so many people just put like their name or logo. Like I didn't have a name until like just I'm like, okay, it's a 6-letter domain.com. I'm like, I want it. And it's like simple, so I'm like, I got it, but I'm like, I don't plan to put it anywhere on the like I want it to be something where once someone has the but hearing essentially you say putting their ideology like on the forefront of like their
Which
brand.
that could come in. I mean, you see a heart with a face on it. You don't necessarily read a philosophy right off the bat, but that philosophy is probably plastered all over their storefronts, all over their website, all over their packaging.
I'll write my manifesto.
So,
but
where was
I thought it'd be off-putting. So hearing that it's not.
LA Apparel. We were on their site today. What was the first thing you saw?
We pay our workers a livable wage.
It was like grown and sewn in the U.S. essentially. Yeah. That's like their big selling point. It was the top of their website.
So now what I did is I kind of primed it by saying like, this is kind of the direction I'm thinking it's going into. Now I'm going to take everything that we just kind of talked about and just hearing your thoughts on the business and your thoughts on the clothing, your philosophy, and I'm going to do my best to summarize, but just for this exercise.
Cool.
I say, you know, after it spat out all that analysis on 3 totally different clothing brands, but all with similar outcomes. Now I'm going to give you a background of a unique clothing company. This company, a unique new clothing company. This company is skilled in creating one-of-a-kind pieces from refurbished fabric and shirts from high-quality manufacturers in the streetwear industry. The founder takes damaged and stained pieces and breathes new life into them using a proprietary method for acid bleaching, screen dyeing, and regular dyeing, or screen printing and regular dyeing. Each piece is a work of art designed by hand. Each item was originally manufactured in the United States. The work is also sustainable, utilizing cotton that would otherwise be destroyed. Just kind of spitting this kind of background on it.
You nailed it. Really boiled it down. Like,
nailed it.
Well,
I could have gone into chat and just said, hey, here's my company. What should I do? But I wanted to give it examples of success first.
And when you say prime, really heavily priming. Yeah, that's like...
And so here's the question I ask, that this comes in like way later down the road. With all of these previously analyzed companies, list out a strategic process for how this budding indie clothing can follow in a similar trajectory and create a new community of buyers. And it goes, okay.
I'm curious what a couple of those are.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a list.
So then you take that, and it's, again, this is an intern.
Yeah.
This is an intern I gave
It's a good
research
intern.
assignment. It's a really good intern.
They're definitely getting a referral.
It's an overly eager intern. So overly eager, meaning it thinks it knows everything there is.
It wants that promotion.
It wants that promotion. It really wants that job. But I'm still going to read over this, and I'm going to put my own spin on it based on my human experience. And so that's kind of how we do it.
Boom.
That's incredible.
That was a master class in 15 minutes.
So you keep the conversation going while you get the intel to kind of get that all going behind the scenes?
In an actual meeting, he and I are like completely plugged in with the client, asking all these different questions.
It was
and then
smooth,
I
though.
will do this after the meeting.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense. You don't need to pitch it right now.
I don't want to.
Okay, wow.
I don't want to be like
for doing it live though. It's like actually, I'm like, oh,
it was kind of cool.
Yeah,
honestly.
And so you know, Simon will be engaging and asking all these great questions. I'll be taking copious notes to make sure I fully understand where they want the company to go and what the obstacles are, and then we'll go and do this later.
How do you talk about obstacles?
Yeah.
Like with people, like identifying them, or what do you mean by that?
A great way to do it is kind of like, you know, when you're thinking about your business and all of the things that you need to do in order for it to be successful, what's the like one annoying thing in your head that's like keeping you up at night?
You guys are so good at framing questions. That's what I'm like. I'm so impressed by.
I don't really have any annoying thoughts that are keeping me up. It's more of like I'm like
I think you have a million.
I mean, not literally keeping you up at night, but what's that one thing where it's just
I mean, look how
like,
bloodshot my eyes are. And normally they're not this bloodshot. Normally I'm like, I took a bite of weed earlier today. And it's like once I do that, it's like, man, the eyes and the mouth. Just
for me, it's onions. You know, some people are really sensitive to like onions being cut. You know, when they're cutting onions, he could be cutting onions in the kitchen. I could be in the living room and I'll start crying.
Whoa.
Like, my eyes will just go and I'll just be like, I'll be outside.
But like something clearly, it's a great question specifically for me because something like I haven't slept in 2 nights, so I've been awake for 3 days straight. Something's keeping me up, but isn't so much an annoying thought as so much as I'm like, it's so much potential, but I'm like I just can't let it die, let the ball drop. I just feel like my biggest thing. Okay, so I guess it is an annoying thought of like I don't want to be 50 or 60 and be like I never saw or like tried
with the getting existential.
Just in anything in life.
It's kind of like, and of course with our clients, when we say, we don't actually frame the question exactly like that. It's more of,
you're gonna make them cry. No, I'm kidding.
Because inevitably they'll be like, we need more money because we're in the nonprofit space. Like that's the one thing is like we need more money for our operations and our outreach.
Money. Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the pretty basic answer to that question is already outlined in the fact that we're in the nonprofit world, but. Other times
it's ironic. They're not profit, but they need money. Like that's.
It's funny because for-profit companies also have that same dilemma.
But it's funny the idea of we're a non-for-profit. Our biggest goal is to make money, like to get money. Like I understand it's a necessity.
Well, it's basically at a deeper level. It's we want to continue doing the work that we're doing.
Function fuel.
Yeah, yeah. And so in order to do that, we need donors.
Yeah.
We need volunteers. And so when you kind of dive deeper in, it's like, what is the one thing that's really pressing you guys right now? Is it you guys are saving up to move into a bigger building where you can offer more services and programming? Or is it that you really want to engage the student population to bring on more volunteers? Those are totally different things that we could offer value for and totally different approaches. So it's even though...
And is it like... Do you tend to because the video can almost be a solution to the majority of problems if it's with not quite in graphic design, video, and website. What do you do at that point? Do you just be like, hey, you should go with these? Because essentially by this time it's like you are sold as a good figure. Do you offer consulting at that point as if our physical our apprenticeship level style.
So if we are not the correct fit for them or for to solve their problem, is that the question?
Skill wise, or hey, we don't do that. We don't screen print. You guys actually need shirts or whatever.
If a client comes to us and they're like, oh, we really need someone to code an app for us. We don't do that, but because we,
you've gotten that
creative
far.
Industry is a catch-all. Creative agency is a catch-all. So. If someone comes to us and they're like, oh, we really want you to make an app for our 5K fundraiser.
But you learn it after doing this much with them. So you've built rapport.
We've built up a rapport to where we can be like, actually, we speak this language. We can maybe find someone who's going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And we can prime them a little bit on, where you're coming from and what it is you're looking for, speaking that same language.
And so do you use the word consulting? It's a very
interesting... Do you pass them on?
Yeah.
Just to the other people? You don't subcontract?
Our biggest thing is
I think it depends on the thing. If it's super outside of our scope, for sure go with them.
That makes sense.
100%. If it's something that's kind of still within it, we'll collaborate with that person and then come in and
animation.
Yeah, the animation
Neither of
project.
us are animators.
Yeah.
But a client asked if we could do some animated explainer videos.
So it's going to go on the video.
Yeah, and so I reached out to a couple dozen different animation studios, and it felt like the difference between a really, really legit one and kind of an AI-based one was a significant different pricing structure, and one cost X amount and the other cost 10 times that amount.
Yeah.
It was okay, cool, we found an animator. We can do all of this stuff for you. Let's collaborate with him and do that. It's still
and that's how we came
not this crazy
to
pricing.
know Andrew from Archimoto.
Yeah, so he's helping us out with animation.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
And
just to make sure it doesn't get lost, because I'm essentially in case you haven't already, I'm it's hard to pitch consult. I've never been oh, you should hire me for consulting. I do it, but legitimately, this is you two, especially as a duo, did a really good job of clarifying some things that had even I had pieces of it, and I think as soon as you connect the dots, everyone want to be well, I already knew all that. So that's part of the reason why it's hard to also pitch consulting. It's hey, you're paying someone to talk, but you two did do I just want to give props, a good job of essentially connecting some missing dots and some. It's not oh, now I know exactly what I need to do to get what I need, but is that a service that you guys provide rather than just the intro?
Are you talking about for nonprofits
for anyone or
I mean, not so much. I mean,
I would encourage you just to
we're
be
daily
aware
learners ourselves, and so I feel like we're still.
What's a core part of
I feel within the nonprofit realm, the nonprofit consultant portion knows a wealth of information on kind of that infrastructure building that we
technicalities.
Yeah, the technicalities of different funding sources and stuff like that. So that's a better route.
There's no creative consultants you're a creative consultant, not even with
more of a strategy consultant.
Yeah, a strategy consultant almost, or just a guru. I don't know. It was interesting. It was really interesting just to see you two. I'm so happy.
Yeah, it was fun watching it because I've just been hearing the ramblings, and I'm
And then
Someone's
it's like,
gotta take this for me.
like we have a relationship, so it's like, oh, like, you make the increment. It's kind of like you watch a kid grow up. It's like, oh, we've had this conversation. So like sometimes we get to like a certain rut of like, like just interesting thoughts of like, oh, am I focusing on that more so than videography? Or it's like, well, that's what's paying the bills. Is I'm like, okay, yeah, like this started off as I just wanted to clothe myself. I don't know what it's metastasized into. like
Interesting choice of words.
Yeah,
I know.
like a certain. I mean, but literally, it's like a trance state essentially of some like pure bliss, joy, and like meaning and purpose. Like what keeps me awake at night is like the deep. Like I'm like, okay,
deep
I
need
would
to
be doing a
bleach.
disservice to like my.
I would say, based on that documentary y'all watched the other day that we talked about earlier, the fact that you guys, the biggest differentiator that I'm seeing is you're taking high-end brands and you're making them sustainable, whereas they would otherwise go to a landfill.
Good cloth.
Good cloth. The
Good
name
cloth.
is perfect.
Yeah.
I would say, with my human experience, something that you could do that's really cool, given the fact that they're not tie-dye, they're not traditional tie-dye, but they are tie-dye adjacent,
Yeah,
right?
I'll give it. Yeah.
You know, we're in Eugene. There's a definite target demographic there. But the target demographic you're looking for is that demographic that's
Streetwear.
More a
so
little bit more
yeah.
fashion focused, willing to pay extra money for art.
Little
What I would do is and I don't want to say this and have people kind of groan on the other side of the headphones, but getting involved with festivals might not be a bad idea, but not
Immediately what I thought.
but not in a way where you set up a booth and
Yeah.
you are, you're not setting up a booth like selling them at the festival. What I would do is I would go find who the influencers are who are going to those festivals, like Equinox or not Coachella, but like some of the more hippie ones, more like EDM and kind of, that kind
Where
of
your
stuff.
market's at.
Where your market's at.
What are they listening to?
I would find those folks and I would give them free ones because influencers are that's just a
That's the language
world
they
we live
speak.
in.
It's a lot. They're familiar with it.
But I would also
Yeah.
give it to bands who are on that.
Maybe even do collaborations with
Do
bands.
collaborations with the bands.
Collabs. You should do collabs.
Because these guys are doing, something that I just learned with my ChatGPT is, they had a lot of celebrity collaborations with people in the hip hop scene. You're working in tie-dye, get in the EDM scene, put a lot of this kind of stuff on.
the burners.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People who are going to be like tripping balls at Cascade Equinox next summer.
Rich hippies.
Yeah.
Rich
Also, if
hippies.
you're able to make it like some sort of light, that one where you have where it goes RGB and it interacts with a light.
Oh,
If
that'd
you
be
can
dope.
have some stuff like that where it interacts with light in a
But
specific
this
way
is the
at a
one
festival.
thing
Oh
is
my
you
God.
That would
need
blow
to
people's
you need
minds.
to
That
bring it.
would.
You need to kind of hook in a little bit more to make it so it's a collector's item because it's one of a
Yes.
kind. Someone could find it and then be like, "Oh, this is one of a kind." Meaning that if they see this one and then they see another one that's totally different, they're not necessarily going to tie it to your brand unless you put a logo on it.
Yeah.
And so even though you don't want to, what you can do is you can put it down at the bottom so it's out of the way of the art, or you can put it on the sleeve. You can just have something unique out of the way, not like a front billboard or a back billboard.
So
You could do something like do good.
she did it.
Just like a nice little saying.
And so I
Yeah.
come from the world of like, I got into like buying Kanye's shoes before his clothing, and people make reps of sneakers. If you think of the complexity of that, making reps of like, there's essentially nothing I could do like make a screen print. It's like that could be
Replications?
Just
When you
like,
say reps, what are you saying?
like like replicated.
Oh,
clothing.
okay,
Like
okay.
someone essentially like makes it.
How many do you have?
600 that are like bleached and done.
You know what screen print or printmakers do when they're doing a run of prints? When they're doing like like lino cut, block printing, that sort of thing. When they're signing their prints, they'll sign 6 of 200, and
so
then the
count them
date.
beforehand. That's
And so
actually
if
a
you
good
count
idea.
them,
That's kind of like a painting.
I was
You're
trying
like
to
you're
getting
selling
that
art.
art.
It's
Doing a
tied
blank
into the
of
philosophy.
blank.
Yeah.
And so what you can-
I have number 37. There can't be.
You're
another
like,
number
I have
37.
number 37 of the collection from 2024 or from the first collection. And if you put that in there somewhere, like let's say you screen print just a shitload of tags that you can stitch inside. So that way they have that on the inside and they know that they're one of 600 people out there in the world with these things. Then it makes it more of a collector's item.
'Cause
It's
people
crazy.
would
Like
pay-
you're not in fashion, but that's like you're good at distilling ideas and like it's and like I'm not like I mean hey we talked for an hour and a half and I don't know if I gave either one of you a single compliment realistically it was like pretty much constant jabs.
Aww.
I would like genuinely it takes a lot to get it takes a lot to get me but I'm like you two have impressed me essentially in just like your clarity of thought and your quick adaptation to a completely new industry that you have. I don't know maybe you have industry like experience in it but like it seems like you don't.
Yeah, my only experience with the industry is I got sponsored by a bunch of clothing companies, and they paid for tours, and I repped
that's
them
where
for
that
that.
hypothetically,
I would say the last thing that anybody wants is to wear a logo these days.
Yeah.
Like people are so driving away from that.
Totally. That's why
but
I didn't
people
do it.
want to
but
feel
I'm going too
unique,
far,
and you could easily tap into that.
Yeah, and maybe much like I'm like went back earlier when it was for a job, I didn't like socials. I'm like having marketing be something I'm thinking about all the time. And maybe I'm numbed. Like I feel like anytime I pitch any like have a phrase, a specific phrase, a phrase that sounds good, it feels like like it feels off-putting. It feels like it dirties it in a way.
You guys
but
could start a subreddit for good cloth.
100%, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And have that as, ooh, okay, yeah, you can
think of the reseller market.
Exactly, where it's like.
Because I mean, you can wash them 100 times. Like especially
You guys can start a good cloth subreddit. Kind of, I hate to I don't want to mislead folks, but hand them out to a few of your buddies who who are already going to be going to these things.
Mm-hmm.
Have them take photos in them, post to the subreddit. People take selfies.
How many people post to the subreddit is the missing component.
Take selfies in the good cloth at the festival. And then after you've got that around, then you leave QR codes up, good cloth, in the porta potties.
Oh my gosh, the guerrilla marketing would be so fun for like a clothing brand like this.
And that is an interesting thing of like, okay, so
and then
as
when
soon as
people
that starts
post,
working,
make it a part of the Reddit flare where you have to put what numbers you have.
Mm.
I have 6 of 200. I have, you can put it in the flare, like how many you have, or like if you're like really into the black ones or the red ones, or like.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love the idea of like a community around it.
Well, because this is what you're wanting to cultivate, right?
Literally,
is a
an
community.
idea I had was I'm like I want to throw a party one day
Yeah,
and just say if you have a shirt of mine, come to this party.
Yeah.
Like that was my idea, which is essentially you kind of like a way of doing it online. Well, and the thing
is if
and
you
like the group chat.
If you build up more and more of this community,
gosh.
you're not going to have any issues with down the road. If it becomes like kind of like a cultural phenomenon, you're not going to have any issues going to the CEOs of these other companies and
I
say,
love that you
hey,
tied it back to my core of like kind of I'm like I don't need it to be my own thing. I want to tie into a group. Yeah, and
you're
it's
easily
like
going to be able to go
concept.
and say, hey, give us your damaged shirts. We're going to turn them around and make them into classics, and then we'll give you a referral fee.
Yeah. And then you could probably just like buy up their whole lot of like B stock or stuff.
This
like
is actually
that.
really similar to how Banana Republic started.
Really?
They got their start because they were going to essentially lots and buying up old military uniforms. So there were all these like rejected or damaged like military uniforms or military pieces just being sold by the pound in these lots. And so
fascinating.
That's crazy.
And so what they were doing then, this was like in the 70s or the 80s, I want to say. What they were doing is they were going and buying these things by the pound because they decided they were going to like quit their jobs working at a newspaper in San Francisco.
I could totally see that with buying Banana Republic.
And then they called it Banana Republic because all of the clothes had that like military vibe. The whole like shtick in the beginning was clothing from a failed state in the Banana Republic was their whole shtick at the beginning. And so they're kind of vaguely military, like safari clothes, and then it just kind of went bananas. And they realized that they had to, because they were buying all these sample sizes, they had to figure out a way to kind of scale and optimize because, there's only so many like, flight suits from this one regiment in France, that they bought at the sale, so everything was one of a kind. But they went into making it more of like a mass manufacturing situation, keeping the same vibe.
Yeah.
They sold to Gap. A lot of the philosophy went out the window. But you guys could tap back into that one of a kind thing.
Yeah.
Well, and what a good like thing for these people who are like producing these shirts that are damaged. It's like, cool, now there's an easy avenue for you to make a little dough, not hurt the planet, not like
you're going to be throwing these things out anyway.
It's a win.
Except for Kanye and LA Apparel, which is part of the reason why I'm
Right.
like, oh, they can
Mad
have
props.
business respect. And a way
They
that
really
I just
do.
find respectable is he's like, it doesn't damage, like, lower the quality of his brand. Like, he sells all his clothes for $20. Like, his goal, that's part of the reason he left a lot of deals. He's like, I don't have a say over pricing. They're overpriced. And that's, like, the one oddity. I'm like, and I don't have to perfectly align with him, but he's, like, my North Star in terms of how to conduct business. And I'm like, I don't, like, if I only have 600 to sell, and I went through the effort, I'm like, okay, it is at a festival and a lot of people are going. It's like, well, I would have to price them higher, else they'd just be gone instantly. And it does take a summer to make 600. So I'm like, then it, like, you know.
Because what you don't want to do is set up like a booth at a festival where you're selling these to people who are just like
gone. And
you know, they got it as a souvenir. It's not a souvenir. It's a community you're buying into.
The community aspect of it, of like finding a way to really build that.
Yeah, festival clothing is also very expensive.
Yeah.
Like you're looking at like
Crazy expensive.
$200 to $1,000 per like thing.
For like a jacket. It's crazy. And people will
so
do
like
it.
that is a solid
and if
market
you,
within
if you
that.
add the sustainability factor to it,
Yep.
and you add the fact that they're handmade, one of a kind art pieces,
Yep.
And the actual, like,
and it's good
cotton.
quality.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, and that's like the one fear of like some of them, I'm like, I don't want to sell because I'm like, if you feel and I'm like, I don't know if you're like cotton fans, but I'm like, the thickness, or like,
Well,
it's
people
hard
are
to
moving
find.
away from synthetic materials.
Yeah.
So, or maybe that's just my bubble of the internet.
This
but-
is better than a polyester shirt at the end of the day.
Oh, and more like, less so that, and more of like, or like if you're a fan of it, other than I'm like, I don't know if I'd be able to get another one of these. So like, I like have a weird attack. Like, I feel like I'm just like the person who I'm like, oh my God, this is a community. I got all of them. I don't want to sell any of them.
I
So
am the
like,
community.
that's the interesting thing. But I'm like, I don't, you know, it's funny. I told Kenzie today, I'm like, okay, so here's hypothetically like the most expensive or best piece I have. It didn't cost the most for me to get, but so Kanye West did DMX's, the musician's, not funeral, but his
Wake?
Was it the parade?
It was in a little
Funeral?
Procession? Wake?
Procession?
Celebration of life. We're just throwing out synonyms.
DMX funeral. He just printed enough for all these dancers to have a
Like a memorial show?
Yeah, I might say.
Oh, wow.
Service choir to tribute to DMX at. I'm sure it says it like the next thing. But so there's only that many of these made. And they're like actually very coveted in the Kanye like kind of ecosystem. And what it took was being at the right place and like just being on it all day, because I'm like, I just found it fascinating. I'm like, wow, look at the cut of that one, look at the cut of that one. And it's like, I did this and I'm like, the interesting thing, because sometimes I don't wear the ones that I'm like, oh, that's a nice piece, but I'm like, who am I saving it for? Because specifically with stocks, it's like when the stock goes up, it's like, why sell it? It could go up more. If someone came tomorrow and was like, let's just say an outrageous price, someone's like, I'll give you $1,000 for that. Like logically, I should be like, sold. But then a part of me would be like, oh my God, if someone's willing to pay me $1,000 for it, wait until there's a community behind it. It seems like it would be this never-ending system of like, it's really interesting to let go of one pieces. Yeah, I don't know. Just this.
No, I think there's absolutely a market for it.
Yeah, but of just like how to.
It's Tyger. He is the market.
Yeah, yeah. Of just like how to sell. Like, yeah. If I don't, I just want to
you're-
train a team because I really do get emotionally attached to them in a weird way, and that's why I'm like.
You want to train a team to make these?
Yeah, just so I like, and I like. I mean, honestly, it'd be fun to, man. And you could do it. I was going to be like, man, be the community builder. But I'm like, you had really good ideas. I almost don't like, funny enough, running a clothing company, being involved in it at any fundamental level is not my calling in life whatsoever, is the oddity. Like, I wouldn't call myself a fashion, like, I'm not a designer. I'm not a clothing, like, I'm like, I like making videos.
That's kind of why. That's kind of why I asked. You know, where are the phases in your plan for this? You know, 1, 3, 5 years out. You know, do you want to be doing this as like a hobby? Do you want this to be a company that grows and scales? Do you want this to be something where you have employees, or is this just a cool thing you like to do in the backyard?
So I would say if this all ends up in some years being like, wow, it was wildly successful, just what you guys have done today, it's like I would repay that as just a felt understood. So I'm like, I want to teach it to people who'd like, cool, I don't have to be a part of it anymore, but I'm like a part of the team. I don't know. It's hard to think about.
It's good stuff, though.
Yeah. So anyways, man.
So our consulting fee is.
So where would you like the
But
invoice
honestly,
sent?
so it's like, yeah, more or less, because I'm like, consulting is a very big value. What you just did there will hypothetically help the trajectory more than just like a video, like making a video. And a video would take a lot longer to make, but it's like the value that it brings. And like essentially, if I was any sort of company with like employees and like a sales rep, I'm like, you would have increased like if I look at my revenue in the next 5 years, a hypothetical where the conversation didn't happen versus did, it's like
consulting's an interesting one because it's like.
But that's undeniably valuable.
I guess we like doing the execution after the consulting.
Okay.
Yeah, because
So it's like
I feel that.
that's a tricky thing too, like especially in graphic design world where you can give them a logo, you can give them brand standards, you can give them all the different variations of their logo, you can give them a lookbook and a style guide and like all of these different basic like puzzle pieces to like this is how you make this work, and then you just have to have faith that they actually do it, because you can put a ton of work and research and strategy into a project, and then if you give it to them and then they don't execute it properly, then it like backfires, and you can't let that like weigh on your soul. And
that would be really interesting, like designing a logo. I've never thought about that. Just whole like life cycle.
Luckily, I haven't had too many where like they screw it up. Like most, and also that kind of falls back on like how good are your brand standards, how good are your style guides, like do you communicate well enough in the pieces that you give them to then give to their staff to where like anyone can see this and know what to do. Yeah, it's interesting. We had a project in school where I think we were each given a set of brand standards, and we were told to make a brochure for a company using those brand standards, and everyone's brochures look different.
Was it like a real company or like a hypothetical?
It was real. Okay. It was actually a real company. It was a nonprofit up in Portland, and it was an exercise in like, this is why you want to make sure your brand standards are like super tight, because anyone can interpret these in a number of ways unless you're very specific and you're really good at communicating. It's not just moving pixels around; it's communication.
So I have a question, because this is something that I feel like I just kind of keep running into, and I'm curious from your perspective of like, people have their like little brand guide maybe that they have like
clients and customers that we've like been like known.
Like we'll like put together a video and we'll like throw a title in the video, and they're like, make it the brand font, even though
the brand font might be
kind of hard to read or like
in a couple like it's like
in context on like the video. So it's like, how does
it's an interesting situation of like leniency of like brand guides, like,
and maybe I don't understand brand guides.
Honestly,
like,
it kind of depends on the designer they went to, and I hate to say it, but like a lot of the cheaper designers, because of that, they don't give you a lot of flexibility. It's kind of like if you're going to go to the hardware store and you're going to buy a toolkit, that is going to be different than if you just go buy a hammer. It's going to be more expensive to get the toolkit than just the hammer, but you're going to be able to do a whole lot more stuff.
And then you have the cheap toolkit, which is going to
And then you got the cheap toolkit.
break.
Exactly. And so, sometimes I'll work with clients where they're like, oh, here's our logos from the designer we worked with, and it is a flat JPEG on a white background.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, well, we can't put that over video and have it still look good.
No.
Or we'll have a client who's like, oh, here's all of the logos from the client, and here are the brand standards. And they didn't give them the logo in white for some reason. Or the logo was made in Photoshop, so you can't scale it without it pixelating. And so it kind of depends on the designer you went to.
And you almost have to remake it, essentially, with... Wow.
I mean, depending on how much,
so essentially,
effort we're
people who are doing cheap brand books are like some of the people who are like, not even just screwing over the company, screwing over everyone who's working with the company in the future, it seems like.
Yeah, it's definitely doing a disservice.
You're doing a disservice.
That's what we experienced with like
so how can businesses like find a good designer? Like if I'm someone who knows nothing about design and like I know a lot about like the company I'm starting, right? Like that's my expertise. And I'm like, okay, like I want to make it a brand. I want to like build it out. Like how do you find a good designer?
It's kind of the same way you find any good service professional. You look at reviews, you look at portfolios. Like, the thing is like...
But when you don't know what you don't know?
You don't know what you
ask
don't
peers.
know. You ask peers, but at the same time, it's like, part of it is just, does that business owner value their brand and understand what a brand does for them? Because a lot of people who are like, let's say you're opening up a juice shop. You need a logo because you got to put a sign out there.
Because everyone has a logo.
Because everyone has a logo.
Yeah.
I got to have something to put on the drink jackets. Totally. I got to have something to put on my business cards. A logo's a logo is a logo. It doesn't matter if I buy it from Fiverr for $15.
Totally.
And when it comes to that kind of business owner, maybe they'll get there, maybe they won't. It's honestly, that's not even.
Is there a downstream fix to it? And I want to get up and grab something.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Kenzie, because Kenzie knows almost as much about Kanye and Yeezy as I do. From all that they've been saying, like, it'd be really interesting, like, not even like for me, but just I'm so curious your breakdown of the way that Yeezy conducts business, or like does like brand, like he literally, there's nothing anywhere. That used to say Yeezy right there. He made it so after one wash it comes off. So there's no branding whatsoever on the clothes.
I would just say for the record that I will never really try to wrap my head around the thought process
and
of
I don't
Kanye
mean to
West.
wrap you into him. I am sorry.
No. It's not just not like a political thing, but
Okay,
it's just
cool.
kind of like there's no way I could even begin to,
I think he's
humans are complex.
I think
Yeah.
he's also at a different stage
Yeah.
of like
His clothing isn't his main business.
yeah.
It is.
And-
Music, he was $300 million in debt from music. He became someone worth, at the peak of his Adidas and Gap, he was worth $7 billion. But they owned all the designs. That he was working with the head of Balenciaga, because they had a rapport.
Isn't Kanye West a bit of a rebel character, though?
Oh, absolutely.
To the core.
I think that's what that is.
Yeah. but
That's
can it be,
saying that,
like,
yes,
yeah.
I'm going to be, and again, I don't want to like claim to understand, but to me, just from the outset, it sounds kind of like, I'm, X amount of dollars in debt from my passion. This is going to help me get out of it, but I'm going to kind of stick it to the man at the same time and say that, like,
That kind of is the brand.
yeah. So
Yeah.
if anything, it's just the brand.
Yeah. And I guess maybe, it's like you need a massive following in music to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
I mean, he is the marketing.
He is the
Yeah.
marketing. Yeah, I just love the idea of him. Because there's nothing salesy and maybe I'm more like attuned to it than most people because we work in the industry. But like with especially like social media, do you feel like you see like I'm done being sold stuff. I don't want to be sold stuff for 5 minutes. I want to see something I like and naturally just come get it.
Yeah.
And so I'd like that to be the environment of clothes. I'm like, I don't ever want to be the person pushing